everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for coming. Can we get a sense of who's in the room? Parents? Okay. Teachers? Board? Board staff or ministry? Yes, okay, great.
Public health nurse?
Public health, okay. Other, yes, okay, thank you. Awesome. So mostly parents. So please bear with me. Well, two things. Thank you very much for the land acknowledgement. I think that that's really deepened the garden-based programs to have that acknowledgement in the classrooms in the morning in school. And then when the kids come out, it's so visceral and so real to be on the land and to think about that. So thank you for that. Also, my apologies that I'm not Katie German from Food Share. That's who passed this opportunity on to me, and I'd like to thank her for that as well. Food Share is an amazing organization, and we've been proud to partner with them over the years. As you can see, my name is Sunday Harrison, and I'm the founder and executive director at Green Thumbs Growing Kids. We've been around for about 18 years. Here's kind of the big picture of the problem. It's not the only problem, but it's certainly a driver in terms of where funding might be coming from to help address. This is World Health Organization graph showing that more than half of our annual healthcare spending in Canada is for treatment of chronic diseases that are certainly, the main risk factors are unhealthy eating, but also physical inactivity, smoking, and the harmful use of alcohol. So in terms of our work, it's certainly important to recognize that boys are suffering from this problem. We tend to think of it sometimes as a female issue. It's most certainly not. As you can see, the boys suffer from obesity at a higher rate than girls worldwide and in Canada. I apologize if policy makes your eyes cross. I just want you to kind of have a little bit of the overarching picture of where we're coming from as grassroots folks doing stuff, and how we can understand the environment in which we do it from a policy standpoint. So first off, Canada is one of the few industrialized countries without a national school food program. But currently, the Liberals attached a mandate to the Ministry of Agriculture to develop a food policy for the nation. So that process is underway, and the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which is a coalition that's housed under Food Secure Canada, is working on advocacy around that policy. In Ontario, we know that up to an average of 1 in 6 children are food insecure, and that up to 2 in 3 Inuit children are food insecure. Up to a third of children in elementary schools and 2/3 of students in secondary schools don't eat a nutritious breakfast before school, leaving them at risk for learning, behavioral, and health challenges. And the prevalence of diabetes and obesity are at all-time highs among Indigenous people, for whom the prevalence is higher than the rest of the population. In terms of food policy, it seems that the Ministry of Education has tried to sort of stay out of that, but they do have they passed the Healthy Food for Healthy Schools Act in 2008. The PPM 150 is guidelines for what can be served in school cafeterias. It's coming up for review. I don't have any information about that. Maybe public health people in the room do.
Do you know when it's coming up for next year?
It's just been rumored that it is up for review, so I don't know what the release date is for that. And that act also supported the limiting of trans fats. A good friend of mine always says that actually curriculum is policy. That curriculum is what tells us what is to be taught and learned in school. So it is in itself a form of policy. So where does food live in the curriculum? It's under health and phys ed. There's no assessment on that particularly. I'm not a teacher, so correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe there is, but I'm not aware that there's any assessment of how children learn about health and physical education and how we measure what they know. At the secondary level, then we have secondary high skills majors, which, or specialist high skills majors, which include culinary arts and horticulture. Of course, these are optional for schools to buy in. I don't know how many there are. Maybe that's something that Stefan can touch on. But those programs obviously support food literacy and understanding and a greater focus on food, but certainly they are all optional. So the public education system, in summary, has kind of stayed out of food. Understanding that, yeah, it's kind of a bottomless pit. Like, you know, once you start funding it, you might find yourself spending a lot of money. So it's really important that other ministries are at the table, Ministry of Health in particular, but also agriculture. Again, back to curriculum, but what children learn is based on the Canada Food Guide. It is also under revision. The 2018 date has been set, and interestingly, it sounds like the food guide will be less influenced by corporate interests than previous food guides. They have not been invited to consult, so that in itself is a kind of a marker of, I think, public pressure to get corporations out of food policy per se and to have a public health perspective. So we'll see. I mean, the food guide is a useful tool, but it's been criticized very, very widely that people don't understand serving size and that it hasn't really moved the dial. You can see from the first slide that obviously using this tool for public education has not moved the dial. The dial has been moving the other way. And we know that only a third of children eat the recommended number of servings of fruits and vegetables daily. On the other hand, environmental policy does point to understanding our relationship to food, including food, water, energy, air, and land. So this is a beautiful policy. It's a policy framework, which means that the Ministry of Education says this is what boards could make policy on. It doesn't tell them what that policy should look like, but it should be, this is the framework, right? So it's a beautiful vision. This was developed over a couple of years, about 10 years ago, with Dr. Roberta Bondar and the Working Panel on Environmental Education. Having said that, there's no money attached to that framework or that policy, and it went to boards as a sort of open-ended, here, do what you like. So back to our role as garden partners, there's actually no funding through the Grants for Student Needs from the ministry for school grounds. So it doesn't matter if you have 0 school grounds or you have half an acre, you are responsible as a school to look after that property and to ask your principal or superintendent or whoever for the money required to mow it or plant trees or whatever it is you want to do. It's not considered instructional space. So if we're doing gardens on school grounds and we're arguing that this is curriculum and this is health and this is all these things, there's no money in the Grants for Student Needs to cover that cost. A couple years ago, the government had money for full-day kindergarten, and a lot of the schools that we worked with and that we were familiar with used that money to expand their outdoor spaces. So that was a really positive thing, but I don't know if that was how the money was intended. It's just that that's how people used it. So it shows that we value play and outdoor spaces more and more, as especially in dense urban neighborhoods where the school ground might be the only green space that children actually know. Here's an example. I don't know, I mean, it's a lot of text, but it's a beautiful example of an enabling policy. It's online, Thunder Bay Catholic District School Board. It basically says everything that I would ever say about why school gardens are beautiful and how they contribute to not only healthy eating, but academic achievements, local, farm to table kind of support for the local economy and all of those related things. So a beautiful policy. It's coming up for review in 2018, and I hope that they spread it throughout the province.
That's my city.
Awesome.
Very, very nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I don't know every policy in every board in the province, but this one does stand out, we have a kind of provincial campaign called Imagine a Garden in Every School, and so as we become aware of policies in different boards, it's great to promote them so that other boards can learn. Okay, just a note on the research of on school food programs. There's certainly very good research on positive impacts on children's mental health, reducing bullying, aggression, anxiety, and depression, fewer visits to the school nurse. An evaluation of a morning meal program in the TDSB found that students who consume that morning meal have a 10% increase in skills in independent academic work, initiative, conflict resolution, class participation, and problem solving. And school gardens are widely studied. Often the studies are short-term. It's been difficult to get longitudinal data, but there are good meta-analyses of the data that's out there, and it's very, very clear through the research that they increase academic achievement, particularly in the sciences, and increase consumption and willingness to try new fruits and vegetables, increase environmental awareness, and support positive social emotional development. The advocacy that is currently happening it's very active right now around this universal school food program. It's been recommended by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, the Ontario Healthy Kids Panel, and the former David Butler-Jones, former Chief Public Health Officer for Canada, calling for a universal school food program. The Ontario Edible Education Network, if you're not aware of, Sustain Ontario is an organization working around food and farming issues, and there is within that a working group that aims to bring together practitioners and policymakers. And food literacy is one of the kind of catchphrases. Some people are a little unclear about what that means. We're not trying to say that like people don't know anything. It's more about re-skilling and bringing back some of the food skills, including growing and cooking, that have been lost because of corporate control. And about our organization, what we do. We run school garden and food literacy programs in a cluster of 4 elementary schools in downtown Toronto. We started that work in 2000. And we've learned that each school is different, but they're all schools where kids don't have so much access to food producing spaces, green spaces, and nature in general. I would say our programs are equally as effective in connecting children to nature broadly as into food production. And there's our website, and we've got some curriculum resources there. This is the large garden is Winchester Public School, and you can see the food beds are all along the fence, and that's so a lot of the vining plants can grow up the fence. There's a large learning circle. There's a lot of native plants and beds with trees and just kind of open loose parts play. There's a lot of loose parts play goes on there. It is a very large garden to manage, but that's just what happened. Like, that was my kid's school, and it used to be full of portables when the enrollment was higher. And when the portables came out, some members of the community actually organized to get the garden installed. And then we were asked to come as educators. I was running an after-school program at the time, gardening and nature program. Yeah, so the rainwater system was installed by a youth design group. It's not fully installed there, but it's basically ductwork along the fence, and it fills the barrel. It does actually work. It's very good. What else can I say? The food grown in the garden comes into the cafeteria, and we're lucky enough to have a lunch program where food is cooked from scratch, and the nutrition coordinator will take everything from the garden and turn it into something that is in front of the kids, and as far as they're concerned, when they see that salad bar or those foods, they grew all of it.
Yes.
So it's kind of, it's how you learn. You don't have to produce, kilos of food to get the same effect, because they have the exposure in the garden, they see it in the lunchroom, and they make the connection. Some cooking programs in the classroom are also, sorry, you should give me the my time is
Getting
going.
ready to start.
Yeah.
Slide.
I think it's important to mention that there are lots of garden programs in our public schools. In our higher income schools, the Parents Council often raises the money to pay a garden educator to help upkeep that space and to teach children. So it is happening, it's very uneven, and it's not equitable. So that's why our advocacy is for universal programming in the outdoor spaces. So to kind of meet the curriculum objectives from September to June, but to somehow the question is always, what do you do about summer? So in our community, each school is different, but we have developed a model where, because we have a cluster of schools, we can hire youth to run programs or just to simply take care of the gardens. And that comes with having that little bit more organizational capacity. We also invite the day camps that are serving the children, same children who planted in spring as part of their classroom experience, to come back to the gardens in the summer to harvest, weed, and water. And to spray each other with the hose. And also at the large garden at Winchester Public School, we have a weekly drop-in, so families just come and pick off that produce. And a note here about the cultural relevance of the produce. We've had parents just basically guerrilla plant what they want in the garden, which is great. It's the way I learned that sweet potato greens are edible, and you plant the sweet potato in June. The greens grow through the summer. People harvest those greens, cook them, and in the fall you have sweet potatoes to harvest. And that's thanks to the Bengali parents who make that happen. I'm trying to get me. Yes, yes.
Do you want to run quickly?
Quickly, I think I'm on my next to last slide. We also have a volunteer program which keeps that ratio high, so that when kids come out to the garden, they have their teacher, they have our garden educator, and a couple of volunteers, maybe one of whom is a practicum student from a teacher candidate or early childhood studies, nutrition communications, nursing. They get that hands-on experience, and we get a better ratio of adults to children. And so our model for replication and expansion is basically to get a garden educator for a cluster of 3 or 4 schools. We would then bring in teacher training and facilitate summer programming through our youth program, youth hires, and integrate volunteers through our volunteer program. And that's my last slide.
Thank you. Okay, a round of applause. Whilst I'm flipping and moving slides, did anyone have a burning question they would like to ask now? Yeah, just a very quick one. Okay.
You said that the food is cooked from scratch. Who does that?
The nutrition coordinator is hired. Well, she's worked at the school for many, many years, and she pulls together all the funding. There's a little bit of funding available from city and from the school board and different sources to do that program, the hot lunch program. And she's incorporated a salad bar into her program as well.
So it's not just volunteer
No, I'm not real sure of all the finances, but there are grants and subsidies available for hot lunch programs for high needs schools in TSB. Well, in all the Toronto boards through municipal sources.
Fabulous. Okay.